Welcome back, we are already over time. We want to start with the next session. Perez, can we close the door? We're going to start with session 3 for today, which is gender insensitive data and theory. We have 3 presenters again in this session. We'll start with Indira Hirway, who's presenting recent initiatives in improving collection of time use data. Then we have Oriel presenting her co-authored study, Time Use Diary Designed for Our Times, the importance of multiple continuous fields using the examples of childcare. And finally, we'll have Marlene Kim presenting Gender in Economics, the Problem, Solutions, and Missing Theory. So more or less everything around time use. So very excited for this session, all my favorite speakers here. So I'll give the floor to Indira to start with.
Yeah, okay. In fact, the left, sure, sure. Can I start now?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm happy to be here for a long time. So this is not working.
No, it's all right.
Right. This paper talks about basically why low and medium income countries are lagging behind in producing quality time use data. What are the alternative approaches suggested by global organizations? What are the problems with these alternative approaches suggested by them? And a different approach, if possible. And I'm trying to suggest building blocks with a new approach. Then I'll conclude. Let me start by showing that this is the status of time use surveys these days. This is from Charm study, which shows that emerging countries, 41.4% are conducting national time use surveys, but remember, these are national time use surveys, not based on diary necessarily. And the developing countries, that is low income countries, are 20%. Which means that a small number, a fraction of time, out of this also a fraction of developing countries are producing national time use surveys based on time diary. Now, this is because of several reasons. I'm hurrying up here because there are a lot of slides coming. So first is that time use studies are complex and difficult. That's what they feel. Time use studies are time consuming and costly. Then time use studies frequently, when there is low literacy level and low sense of time in some remote area, they find it difficult to conduct. And that's why what has been suggested already, I've already, yeah. So these are the problems with LMIs. I don't want to go into details, but finally I would like to focus on these problems. There are 2 kinds of problems which are very important to start with. One is that they are not able to design time use survey properly, many of them. So we have done a lot of surveys all over the third world countries. And in other sense, that what are the components? Each and every component of time use survey has not been designed well. And second is problems are pertaining to data collection. As we know that there are many, the first kind of problems are not so serious in the sense that we have an old guidebook of UNST. New one has come out again to cope the new situation. And there is also UNDP and ILO has come out with a fresh guideline from UNESCO. So this is something, a solvable problem. One doesn't worry too much about them because if you have the guidebook, you can design your time use. The serious problem is this, that data collection part is very difficult. Normally developed countries do self-reported time use study with 5 to 15 minutes time slot. But these countries have to do interview and based on 24 time diaries with a little larger time slot, 15 minutes or more. Sometimes they use observation method, sometimes you use stylized method, and many of them use now lifetime diary method. And then some people use mixed method. That means the major methods are these. The best method, of course, is time diary. Even if you can't have self-reported time diary, interviewer-based time diaries are supposed to be better because at least time diary is there to get the data of time used properly. Now, in this kind of a situation, when they do not have enough literacy and many problems, and the problems we narrated just now, what do? How do these countries manage? First of all, what they do is that they prepare a detailed manual for interviewers to show how to collect time use data. So they give detailed instructions to interviewers. Then they give training, intensive training. Then team of interviewers first go and fill in background questionnaires so that they can get rapport with the people and then they can get their confidence and next week and then tell them the date of time use survey also. So they are prepared kind of and they can cooperate better. So then finally there is strong follow-up. So developing countries try their best to get a good time use survey, but there are many problems. First problem is about poor recall. Second is difficulties in collecting simultaneous activities because we have seen that large number of countries don't collect data on this, and when they collect, they try to divide it mechanically into 2 parts or 3 parts or whatever. And several shortcuts are compromising on methodology, like dividing, not using interview with the person itself, but proxies for time data collection, or other kind of compromises they make for collecting time use data. There are innumerable such compromises which they make, or they are not able to tap the potential of context variables well. And finally, because of all these, large number of countries produce poor quality data, and that's why their data are not used fully by a large number of countries. Several countries are there who can produce good data, but only a fraction of these countries are there. So the basic problem is this. Now, in that kind of a context, a lot of recommendations have been made by global organizations. For example, UN Women has said that the central question are how to enable more and more countries to conduct regular time use surveys, how to promote standardization and harmonization of concepts and methods, which I said is easier if you follow the guidelines. And third is how to improve cross-country comparability of data, because a lot of countries have done the way they would like, and that's why cross-country comparability is not there. So they find that this is difficult. That's why what they suggest is lifetime diary. This is seen as a solution to the problems of developing countries. And that's where the problem lies, because the number of activities would be around 25 to 30. Sometimes it goes up to 30 to 35, not more than that. So out of 165 activities recommended by ICARUS, that means International Classification of Time Use Activities, they take only 30 to 35. Another thing is that they use hybrid approach. That's what these global organizations suggest, that use hybrid approach for certain things like supervisory care, or for knowing more about how many people were doing simultaneous activities or not. So what additional information you need or you think you are lacking, you use stylized questions. In this survey, you ask these questions and try to get this information. So this is the solution given by UN Women. The World Bank also gives the same kind of solution. They think that the time used under this small, this developing countries, they tried something in LSMS, that means Living Standard Measurement Survey, under which time use survey was conducted. And that's what FAO also has suggested. But in this, what happened is the time use survey component is a very small component. And one which was done in Nepal, for example, had only something like 142 households and 1200. So it's something which can be managed in a very small scale. It can't be used in a national kind of a survey. So Catherine Biggle, I don't know if she's still there, but she was a leading economist in human development team in the World Bank. She has written a paper and suggested how exactly LMIC should do this survey. She said that time use survey is critically important for women's contribution to conventional economy and to know their unpaid services, but they find it complex, and that's why the solution is that use lifetime diary. So she also suggested the same thing. I'm going fast now. University approach also is the same. They suggested lifetime diary, and here they have given different logic, but they've given the same stuff basically. And their addition was that the modernization of time use survey, so they improved over the technology of time use survey to reduce the effort, the burden on interviewer and on respondent, as well as on NSOs, National Sample Surveys. ILO has given this concept, and this is something very important. ILO has coined a new concept, OPS, which is nothing else but unpaid domestic services and care. Now, this is something vital first step. OPS means own use production of services. That is same thing which we call this way. Now, I was interested in time use surveys basically to implement the new concept of work and work statistics. And that's why they suggest this kind of a solution. And I was piloted in several countries, I think recently in 3 major countries, to see whether its method works or not. And it has recommended also hybrid time diary. And it said that up to 440 activities you can select out of 165, and you have to conduct this survey with 15 minutes to 20 minutes time slot using interviewers, and that way you collect the survey. Now, I don't think that this is a preferred approach. It includes, what they do basically is that LFS, labor force survey, is conducted, and this time use is an add-on module to this survey. Now, this labor force survey also is truncated in the sense that it is not a full, complete labor force survey. It includes basically employment-related activities, employment, unemployment, and those kind of things. Nothing more than that. And time use survey also is truncated in the sense that it has only 40 activities, and that is the way they should conduct. But they take care of simultaneous activities and primary, secondary, and tertiary care. Now, those who have read Nassif know it very well how to collect the data. So they are using the same method, recommending the same method. Now, they have 3 additional series to this. So, sorry. So first series, just time use. Second is stylized question for supervisory care. And third is to reported diary as an unusual anyway. So the first survey is like that. Now, without going into details of that, I would like to say what I want to say first. First of all, lifetime diary suggestion is not acceptable. Basically, it is truncated time use survey. Labor force survey also is truncated time use survey. Now, both the truncated time use survey used in developing countries doesn't really give good results. It gives truncated results in the sense that you don't get complete good results of even labor force and related to whatever is related to that. Secondly, lifetime diary has been researched a lot by statisticians, and they have come out with the conclusion that when you compare the results of full-time diary and lifetime diary, it becomes very clear that full-time diary, as compared to full-time diary, lifetime diary gives very truncated results, and aggregate level maybe they match, but in details they differ significantly with each other. Thirdly, this kind of a survey, you cannot take up satellite accounts for measuring unpaid services because it requires a lot of details. Those kind of details are not available in this truncated label LFS or in truncated time survey. So it's argued that advantages of using time diary are, they've argued that this is a less complex survey, reduces burden on employer, on interviewers and respondents and so on and so forth. But these advantages are not so important compared to the quality result that we get. So I think that there is no reason why we should use lifetime diary. And when I come to this, I think I would again, when you club the activities into 40, you miss out on many other details. So this approach is not acceptable. The way we have compared in our own study about this different results, we have seen that a lot of things are missing. A lot of things are not collected, which are very important even for labor, even for time use survey. And that's why we have given a broad outline which tries to avoid this. What we say that what is critical is collection of data. Can we improve collection of data? Yes, you can improve. You can use full diary, but at the same time, you can take just 1 day for a survey. You can take just one person from household selected. You can also think in terms of interview going 2 times a day. You can also have 2 days, not 2 days, but just 1 day, and it can be collected using CAPI or your whatever hand, you can use tablets or whatever it is. So when you collect background data on this thing, your coding expenditure goes down. And if you take pre-listed activities, then coding and data entry both are taken care of. And when you do time use collection, time use data collection, that also becomes much easier if you go this way, if you reduce the burden like this. And that's why I have a feeling that the above approach reduces cost of conducting time use survey, burden of respondents and reviewers, interviewers. It also improves the data quality than what we have today. It takes less time, and it is also helps in digitalization of the data. So details of this approach can be worked out. We have a paper on that. But what I would like to say is that it's important to find out an alternative for developing countries. The solution which has been given by all these global organizations doesn't seem to be acceptable. Thank you.
We now have Luiza provide her discussant remarks, please. If you'd like to, we have some. Use this one, be better. One touch.
Just because I'm tiny, so if I'm there, no one sees me, right? So Thank you so much. It was an honor to read your paper. So when Aashima sent me your paper, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're going to be coming from her. I've been reading your work for so long now, and it's been such a reference. So I'm very happy. And the second one is like, this was a paper that I needed to read. This is exactly what I needed to read at this moment. So this was great. So I'm part of a group right now that is discussing the possibility of running a pilot for Brazil. So there are so many things here that are extremely helpful exactly for us. So I see you have a targeted possible audience for this that maybe was not exactly what was intended for, but I think it's great. So I see the main objectives of the paper that are definitely very well achieved are to discuss the obstacles to having good time use data on low and middle income countries, present recommendations made by global organizations, so doing the survey of all of these recommendations that have been made to deal with this gap of data between the rising demand for data and the lagging behind of the supply of quality data, and then critically engage with those recommendations and propose an alternative approach. And as already mentioned, I think one other achieved result is to present a very helpful survey of resources that anyone engaging with the statistical organizations that are considering running a TUS can use. So this was great, I think. So when we talk about the critical problems of low and middle income countries, the two main problems, you put them in two main categories. One is related to the design of the survey and its different components. And the second are problems pertaining to the collection of time use data. The first problem, as you see, those resources that exist, you believe that they can deal with that very well. And it's mostly the second type of problems that you are focusing on, being problems that need being addressed by redesigning surveys or having different methods and so on. And I would like to think that there is a little bit, it's not that there is a third problem. I think this is a problem that is a problem that precedes the problem pertaining to the collection of time use data, or is of a different nature, so to say. This is cited in the paper, but as part of the problems pertaining to the collection of the time use data is the cost of it. But I think in countries, and here really I'm talking about the problem we've been facing in Brazil with this, is the fiscal constraint. So we keep hearing that. And I know when the ILO is talking about having a lifetime diary, they are talking as well in dealing with countries where it's not feasible to have a time use survey. And this is something I was talking with Mary last night. What does it mean to not be feasible? Where is the non-feasibility of it? We're talking about and where does that obstacle come from? And I think it's very different depending on the country and how much you want to push the boundary of this. Because if we are running, as you do very well in the paper show, if we are going to use the lifetime diary, we are going to be giving up on other things. But if this is the only thing we can do, and to find that fine balance and understanding what is feasibility or not, that's a huge problem. So the problems pertaining to this collection of data, as I mentioned, is first poor recall, the inability to implement the data collection. So those are problems, especially regarding the simultaneous activities. And one solution for that is the hybrid methods. The shortcuts that have been done has to do with difficulties with having, I mean, what you say that is that we need for at least part of the survey to be a diary in some way, so not only having stylized questions. And then finally, the problem concerning the too high costs, which I think is one of the main objectives of light diaries as I see them. And the way I see is that lifetime diaries are basically trying to deal with the last problem without giving up on the first three, or at least kind of taking into account that those other problems exist. So, and this is from the Time Use project, the Labor Force Survey ILO project. So they say that the goal is to offer a practical solution where an independent time use survey is not feasible, again, they're not feasible, or where interim statistics are needed between dedicated time use rounds. So especially when we're talking about the second one, I think this needs to be taken into account, that this is a very well thought instrument. If you're not running your time use survey, even if you have a full time use survey, it's important to have data between those time use surveys, which happen, I don't know, every 10 years in many countries. And in that case, the light diary, some of the critiques to the light diary are not necessarily going to apply because you still have the full survey once every 10 years, for example. So as I think of this deals with that high cost, low technical expertise problem that is one of the cited ones, while not compromising the other worries. That's the idea, is kind of trying to deliver everything you can. And obviously it's not going to deliver everything because nothing does, unfortunately. So your critique too, and I'm mostly basing this on the ILO approach because I think this of all of the ones that you've surveyed, the ILO approach is the one that is the most established right now and that is being piloted and so on. And you do base the critique on your experience working with the pilot in India specifically. One of them is that both the labor force survey and the time use survey end up being truncated, implying limited data available through both of those surveys, which is a problem, obviously. As you mentioned, the clubbing of activities has resulted in losing the data on some important activities. And then as a consequence of that, even though the aggregate results of the lifetime use survey are comparable with the results of the full survey, at the activity level, those results are going to vary significantly. And I think it's important to know what are we giving up when you take a lifetime diary, but at the same time, this means that there are certain things we're going to be able to do with a lifetime survey that we would not do with a full survey, but that's better than no survey at all, which is sometimes what we're dealing with. Okay. So some comments on those proposals. The first one is the last controversial part. I think the background questionnaire should be well designed and coded, and using the mixed mode approach. So using the hybrid method, I think this is very standardly accepted now, especially to deal with the simultaneous activities. And the more complicated, to improve the recall problem, you propose that interviewers should visit the respondent 2 times a day, 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. I don't know, I haven't done surveys, but this sounds a little, I mean, I feel like it could be difficult because it's already hard to find the people once at home. Twice, it seems to add cost and some difficulties in the respondency rate. So one of the problems of respondents rate has to do with not being able to see the people at home. The second one is that you say, and here I'm quoting, since about 80 to 85% people use mobile phone these days, the rest can be given mobile phone for 1-2 days for getting reliable data. I think there are 2 problems with this. One is the cost of actually having those mobile phones to give to people. The second one, which is my biggest worry actually, is that not necessarily those people that don't have mobile phones know how to use them. So we still have a literacy problem with those. And I don't know, there would be a bias because who are the people that wouldn't have those? So I don't know if there is any way. One thing I always wonder, and this is not, I haven't seen, is some kind of mixed method in the sense of some people are going to be surveyed in one way and the people that don't have phones or don't know how to use phones are surveyed slightly in a different way. I don't know if this is possible as well. And yeah, so, and then the final is one self-interested question. And I guess this is not only for Indira, but also maybe Valeria. So what is the problem of, instead of doing a module on the labor force survey, doing a module on the expenditure survey, knowing this is not going to be a solution for the interim problem because expenditure surveys are also only running every 10 years or so. But I'm just curious because this is what Brazil is proposing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Luiza. That was very helpful. We move. Okay. So we looked at the challenges of time use data collection, and now we move on to time use design by Oriel Sullivan.
Well, thank you very much. I'm here to actually address how we could perhaps use some of the technological advances that have been happening recently to address some of the issues that have been raised in the previous paper. I'm very grateful to Indira for laying out such a comprehensive overview of time use diary usage in LMDCs, LMICs, and I think that it helps me to move forward quite quickly through some of the early slides of my presentation. I want to focus here particularly on topics relevant to this workshop in gender inequalities and the application to LMICs. I asked first, what can diary data do? This is just a general question. Hopefully I can run through it quite quickly because I get the sense that people here appreciate what time use diary data can do. But I think what I want to emphasize is the importance of a general purpose time use diary, not just one that collects 35 activities, as in the light diary format. The list of policy applications that are possible using time use diary data, and an illustration just using a recent piece of research that we've actually done for the ILO, looking at child labour. So increasingly, time use data is recognised as a crucial part of the toolkit of national statistical organisations, and there's this growing demand for it to be a centrepiece of systems of social and economic statistics. If we look at these 5 areas, and really actually I could have thought of more. So extended economic output, the fact that time diaries can measure simultaneously paid work and unpaid work, household work. So you have this potential value for non-money output. The distributional inequalities and human, I've written capital, capacity, capabilities formation, it all applies. The recognition in the SDGs of the value of unpaid care and domestic work, and of course how that is distributed among population groups, in particular in relation to gender inequality. And then if you have a time use diary that has a field that includes well-being, well actually instantaneous well-being, how people are enjoying the time that they're currently spending, whether that's a combination of activities and people and locations, then you have this affective field which enables the calculation of sort of well-being, instantaneous well-being measure as a measure of social progress to go alongside more conventional economic measures. Those are sort of direct measures using the diary, but of course recently I think people have appreciated the importance of being able to attach rates of different kinds to general time use diary data. So health is a key area, as well as direct measures of sleep and eating frequency and duration. You can attach metabolic energy levels to various activities involving exercise. You can look at social context and contacts. This is something that came up during the pandemic, but you can look at people's activities, where they are and who they're with, as to derive some sort of measure of risk of infection through contact. And then it's the newest development in the area of environmental sustainability, material requirements for activities, but also footprints in the form of energy usage associated with different activities. And time use data, of course, gives us a handle on those potentially. So just a small illustration of the importance of having this time use diary data. This is from 3 countries, South Africa, Tanzania and Mongolia, that have these good time use diary data sets. And this is just showing in relation to gender inequality and child labour. This is for children aged 12 to 17. So you see on the left-hand side, the National Accounts Boundary work, paid work, monetary work. And you see boys and girls, boys in blue and girls in pink, of course. And then the right-hand side shows what happens when you add to that all the unpaid household work. So, you know, not only these work totals go right up, as you would expect, but there's a complete switch in what you would understand about, you know, which children are involved in child labour in terms of their gender, because you have a switch from boys doing more to girls doing more. So moving on to the technological advances, we've had decades of design of pen and paper diaries, and I'm going to use the Harmonised European Time Use Survey UK example. It's generally thought of, it's a time use diary, a harmonised time use diary exercise that's run through Eurostat, and it's generally regarded as, you know, one of the best design surveys and data collection methodologies. We thought that we could use this to extend a light diary design done online to incorporate the full Eurostat defined HETAS diary. But first we wanted to go back to the principles. What are the design principles? So this is a diary. So you've got here the time runs down the first column, sorry. What were you doing? So this is the primary activity. If you were doing something else at the same time, this is all a writing diary. Did you use a smartphone, tablet or computer? So the use of ICT devices. Where were you while you were doing this? Who were you with? And then finally, how much did you enjoy this time? Okay, so that gives you the sort of the basic, the general purpose time use diary designed for pen and paper. So what does this do? It collects multiple fields. In other words, activities, locations, co-presence, ICT devices, and effective response. These fields are continuous, okay? They're not just asked about specific activities. Each field is a continuous 24-hour record. The fields are independent, okay? So it's just as our lives, you know, in our lives, these things are independent of each other. We might be, you know, watching TV and sometimes we're with a partner and then the children come and then everyone goes away and we're still watching TV, or, you know, we're eating and watching TV, or, you know, and the eating just takes a few minutes and the TV period takes 3 hours. So, you know, these definitions, these fields need to be independent of each other. And then the visual thing, I mean, you saw from the HETAS diary there that it's a very visual, it looks like a diary, it looks like a day. And this is important, this helps respondents to envisage and recall their entire diary day. But we need to think forward, we need to think about, you know, life is moving online, how is this going to apply to data collection? Everyone is thinking about this. I reminded myself of Donald Trump there. Everyone is thinking about it.
Almost everybody.
So, and I don't need actually to go into the second section of this slide because I think Indira has made it clear that, you know, people are now favouring this light diary style design. As opposed to an iterative, repetitive, endlessly repeating Right, endlessly repeating survey style design. You know, what did you do at 8 o'clock? When did you do it until? Then what did you, and then were you with anyone during that period? And then what did you do after that? This is the basic light diary design. This is just a section of it, in fact. This is a pen and paper design. Typically, as we've heard, you know, 30, 35 activities here, and respondents simply mark, if they're doing it themselves, what activities they were doing at a particular time. But it is limited, it's just got the one field, it's just got primary activity here. And this is the classic light diary approach. But you can use this visual and extend it. So we designed this extended light digital diary, we've called it. We ran it with a nationally representative sample in 2023. And in the UK, we got a completion time of 26 minutes for this full diary, excluding that's the very long and very short completion times. And this is what it looks like. So this is the completed diary. You have the same 7 fields here, the primary activity across the rows, the secondary activity, location, who are you with, this is multi-coded, so there's room for putting in more than, I think, up to 4 different codes here. Were you using a computer, tablet, smartphone, ICT devices, again multi-coded, and then finally, how much did you enjoy yourself while you were doing this activity at the bottom. So the respondent experience, I do have videos of this, but it takes much too long. So the respondent selects from the main menu here a category. Let's say, I think this person has selected for this timeline here, reading ebooks. Okay, so they start here, you select sleeping, then there's various other, it's click and drag. We can discuss accessibility. I know it's an issue, but it can be overcome. You know, there are easy ways for overcoming the issue of click and drag accessibility. It's just technical. And from what I understand, and I'm not a designer myself, but you know, this kind of design has now become relatively easy to program. People can do this relatively simply. So you select from these main activities and you fill in the time. So you have the visual simplicity of the light diary design, but using this online functionality, you can extend this to multiple continuous diary fields with the use of these drop-down menus. And of course, you always have, you know, the option for pop-up boxes if you want to ask specific questions about specific activities that people select. That's also just a technical issue of programming. So with children, you could ask about, you know, particular components of childcare that you might be doing. And the whole diary is visualized as a whole, which aids recall. There is a smartphone version of this diary, much more challenging because you can't get the whole diary day onto it. What we've done is just put the primary and the secondary activities. This actually shows the completion of the how much did you enjoy this time field here. So in this case, people were scrolling down the screen, clicking and entering, which again is a familiar procedure for people who have familiarity with smartphones. So just, yeah, I think I'll show a couple more slides. So how can this be relevant? And of course, I have failed to get to the most important parts of the presentation, but if we look at these, this is from the national representative survey that we did last year in the UK. So we have the primary activity childcare, 30 minutes were reported. If you add to that secondary childcare, which occurs throughout most of these activities, including primary childcare, you add another 31 minutes. You know, you double childcare by putting in a secondary activity field that includes childcare. So, you know, any survey that fails to include more than a primary activity will only be recording a fraction, a percentage of the actual time spent in childcare. Child co-presence. Look at this, 166 minutes. That's for people not reporting during childcare at that time. So these are people with their children under 12 doing other activities, but you know, presumably this means they have a supervisory role. You know, that is child responsibility. No, I'll go over this one, I'll go over this one. The last thing I will just say is there are various extensions. As I was thinking about this, you know, we use colours, you could use pictures as well as colours. You know, there are some designs of diaries that use pictorial representations of activities, you could do that. The CATI version that we gave to 10% of the respondents of this survey collected as good quality information as the online version with slightly higher response rates because it was interviewer based. The phone interviewers liked it. They only took a couple more minutes, 28 minutes on average, as opposed to 26 minutes to complete. So it works with CATI. But also it occurred to me as I was writing this, you know, if it could be done, you know, in countries where interviewers are involved, you know, you could look at this, you could look at the diary day together with the interviewee and, you know, get the whole picture. And I think that would be a real help with data recall. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Like to. She'll come here to, yeah.
Shall I sit here or
Whatever you prefer.
I think there's a. I think this is a very interesting paper because it has presented multi-field digital time diary design that matches with the information collected by paper and pencil time diary, the best options. That's really good. Your elaboration of the uses of time use survey, so very important, very useful. Then you suggested you wrote that UK introduced time diary in 1990, and then to lower the burden of respondents, you code us, which of course is very true. But I must add one thing that UK uses full diary along with that time diary for a specific light diary for specific purposes. So that is something which good enough in the sense that you get extra details of what you want, but at the same time you have full diary for the country. So that kind of light time diary would be okay. Then you have presented independent primary, secondary, and co-presence data, etc. What is more important, very interesting, your diary designs and everything. But what is important is that, you know, you have clearly mentioned that primary childcare is less than secondary childcare, which is again less than tertiary childcare. So tertiary childcare is, now the question is, do we give equal weightage to that when it comes to valuation of time? I don't know, that's something which you must see, what is it? And then your data collection 3 approach is point estimation, survey-like approach, and lifetime battery. All the 3 are very, very useful and helpful. Technology discussion also I really enjoy, it's good. Pen and paper diary and why web-based diary and why app-based diary and what are the advantages, disadvantages of this. That part is very good. And your conclusion that for the design of a general purpose time diary is that to retain the multiple continuous independent diary data, and that the visual interface that introduces for a respondent as far as possible the look and feel of the actual diary day. So that is really very interesting. I have only a few questions. One is, of course, which I already mentioned, that you can have lifetime diary, like in European countries, particularly Netherlands. They have used lifetime diary, but only as a supplement for a specimen. The full diary they use for all purposes, and they don't use lifetime diary for getting the national level data. Secondly, my question is that when you do satellite accounts of this primary, secondary, and tertiary, you should not use maybe, I don't know how, because you haven't mentioned about the satellite account, but what is important is that should use different weightage for that. I don't know how much this suggestion will be acceptable, because you can do anything else at the same time. You can co-presence or supervise your child or something. So the value could be different. Maybe somebody's cooking and taking care of the child at the same time. So you are sleeping and taking care of the child, even that is co-presence. So that value what should be the value of that is something very important. And finally, I have a question about this HETUS and ICATUS, ICATUS. Have you compared the two and seen whether they match with each other and they can substitute each other? So in that sense, Eurostat is using HETUS, but they don't have to use ICATUS because ICATUS is taken care of by harmonized European Time Use Survey. And my final comment is that I really enjoyed reading your paper.
It indeed is a very interesting one, and especially the digital setup is really very, very impressive. We would now have Marlene Kim, who has a different kind. I mean, her topic is a little different from time use, but very relevant for the data session. She will be talking about gender in the field of economics and some disparities too. Could you help me to speak? Do you stand there?
Yeah, I'll try. So thanks for having me here. I'm Marlene Kim. See you. There we go. And I do have a brain injury. I've had 5 concussions over the last 6 years. Last year, 2023, was the first time I didn't get a new one. People like to rear end me, it seems, when I'm driving. So if I forget your question, what you've said, your name, what I've said, my name, now you know why. So I apologize in advance, and thank you, Levy, for your patience, and to my discussant for her patience. Sometimes my brain shuts down and I have to stop working. So because of this injury, I have not been able to do my econometrics research. So I've been doing qualitative research. And what I'm finding is that gender is a real problem in economics, as you know. Only a quarter of the profession are female, and this hasn't changed much in the last 20 years. Other disciplines in the social sciences have improved, and in STEM have improved as well. So what I'm going to do, thank you, is synthesize a lot of the research, including the climate survey that was done by the AEA in economics, and my own research, which a couple of them have the 2023s. I interviewed 40 women for that to talk about the problems in economics and as well. So today I'm going to argue that the theories in economics fail to explain gender differences, and instead they condone or deny discrimination. That other theories and concepts in other disciplines are better. I'm going to discuss some of these other concepts and theories. And I'm going to argue that these are better explanations for the mechanisms of gender disparity that we see. If I have time, I will summarize. Oh, and I'm also going to summarize the research on women in economics. If there's time, I will look at remedies as well. So, as most of you know, in mainstream neoclassical economic theory, we have human capital theory, where you choose to invest in human capital or education, which is education or training, and these choices can lead to different jobs and wages by gender. This is still a major explanation for why women earn less than men, because we major in the wrong fields. The other basic concept is that wages equal the marginal product of labor. So broadly, productivity explains different outcomes by gender. Women are just not as productive as men. And worse, a lot of economic theories justify inequality by gender. The first one is statistical discrimination. If you remember, the idea is that women on average have are less productive than men. We work fewer hours. We're interrupted by our kids when we're trying to work. So a rational employer will hire men and not women. And I'm putting, or that less is known about our productivity. There's less information, we're fatter at the tails. Less is known, so once again, a rational employer will hire a man over woman. There's a lot of problems with this that I discuss in the paper, but you probably know that. So I'll skip ahead to the fact that Gary Becker's Economics of Discrimination book argued that discrimination cannot exist because it would be competed away. Employers who don't discriminate will hire productive women and will be more profitable, drive the discriminating employers away. The only reason discrimination can exist is the condition of customer discrimination. But of course, there is customer discrimination. Another avenue would be employee discrimination. But that means workplaces would be entirely segregated, all men versus all women workplaces. That, of course, doesn't happen, but we have clear occupational segregation where men are happy to work with women who are their administrative assistants or beneath them and who help them. So in that sense, that does exist. But in general, mainstream neoclassical economic theories say that discrimination is rational under statistical discrimination, or it doesn't exist. So stop complaining. There's a lot of other ways that economics assumes away inequality by gender. The Edgeworth boxes we learned assumed equal endowments when that doesn't exist. By wealth or income. Bargaining models assume equal power when there's patriarchy. And that women still undertake most of the childcare and unpaid work. But in general, mainstream economics assumes that personal traits, preferences, and different productivities determine unequal outcomes for women. Women prefer to stay home with the kids and not work for pay. Or that women are more productive in unpaid work and in childcare than they are in paid work. Job market candidate was arguing that recently. So it still exists. I argue that this doesn't explain the situation of women in the economics profession. So let me look at that briefly. Basically, there's cradle to grave, not social welfare policies, but bias against women throughout our careers. As graduate students, we have less access to advisors, less quality advising, fewer financial resources, such as being RAs, and women get less help in the job market. They report getting less help in the job market than men. And as a result, more women than men fail to complete their graduate studies in economics. And here's some interesting stories by graduate students who weren't helped, who weren't encouraged to go into certain fields when they were clearly better than their partners, male partners. Research on the economics profession shows a lot of disparities. So compared to similarly qualified men, female economists are less likely to receive credit for their work when they co-author with a senior man. People assume the senior man did all the work. That's not true with junior men. They assume junior men did the work as well as senior men, but not for them. We have to produce higher quality work to get published. We're less likely to get published. And what's interesting is in the sciences, this was a study of the sciences, not economics, women are even less likely to be listed as a co-author compared to men on the same projects. We're less likely to be invited to present our research at economic conferences, to join professional associations. We get worse teaching evaluations for the same work, and we have higher service burdens. So we're also less likely to get tenure and promoted to full professor. Non-academic women have the same problems. They complain of unfair treatment in general, also regarding promotions, professional development, and publishing decisions. We're less likely to be included socially and intellectually, and we receive more hostile and patronizing comments when we give our research papers, and we're interrupted more in economic seminars. We're seen differently at the economic job market rumors. Alice Wu found that women are described physically and by their personal characteristics. The most common words to describe women were breast, hot, vagina, beautiful. With men, the words to describe men were advisor, macroeconomics, Nobel. So men were described by their profession, academic status, women by their appearance and sexual whatever. There's a lot of sexual harassment in economics. 23% of women have been sexually harassed. And only 16% of women feel their gender is respected. The theories of inequality outside of economics, I'll go through some of them. These are also described in the piece I've written. Homophily. People love those who are like themselves. Similarity begets friendship. This is probably the oldest observation of human behavior. It comes from Aristotle and Plato. Robert Burns also said, famously, birds of a feather flock together. So so the idea is that if people feel more comfortable because they're a man advising men, they will take men. Stereotype bias. Social psychologists find that men are seen as competent, but not warm. Women less competent than men, but warm, but not authority figures or leaders. So if this is acted upon and women aren't seen as leaders, they will not be promoted to leaders. And that's the outcome of this. Gendered racism. The idea behind this is that social categories such as race also reflect underlying dimensions that are gendered. Oops, and yeah, you can see this. African Americans, including African American women, are perceived as masculine. Asians, including Asian American men, are seen as feminine. So this is a recent article in the New York Times about Asian men that are often emasculated in movies. They play effeminate parts, are now getting the girl. That made news. So African American men are favored for leadership positions in masculine roles compared to Asian men. Asian women are favored dating other Asian women are favored for dating over African American women because they're seen as more feminine. Structural theories, basically, these come from many disciplines. The dominance, basically, I'm gonna talk about Miller's since hers is a very complete theory. Dominance define themselves as superior and they define subordinates as inferior. Thus dominance, the men are seen as intelligent, skilled, hardworking, strong, rational. Subordinates not so intelligent, they're seen as weak, emotional. Dominants take the best roles and jobs because they know subordinates can't do these jobs. So this reminds me of Larry Summers saying that women maybe aren't in economics because they can't do math as well. Dominants define the work that subordinates can do, usually jobs that dominants don't want to perform, like service work. And dominants define traits for subordinates, that they need to be attractive, submissive. If you develop these traits, you're seen as well-adjusted. And dominants enforce these norms because they control institutions like the state, legal, I thought you were gonna give me 2 minutes. Okay. Penal, educational institutions, police and military. They also control the ideology, like the journals and economics. And these institutions and the ideology perpetuate gender inequality. If you oppose the ideology and the norms, you're punished, ostracized. And if you saw with race, you're even killed. So it looks like I'm out of time. But I also argue that economics is not diverse socioeconomically, so these theories about markets working, that preferences matter, you're making your choices are might be relevant for the people in economics, since most of the people have parents with graduate degrees and they probably have those opportunities. There also might be some elitism in economics, that economics is on the top of the food chain of the social sciences. And don't feel like they don't need to look at other disciplines since we're at the top of the food chain. There's a lot of remedies I talk about that I put in case my discussant didn't have time to read the paper, but she did. So thank you very much. I'll just conclude by, there's a problem in economics. Part of it is the economic theory justifies differentials in gender, and the theories that don't do this, that assume inequality and look at how it plays out, are in other disciplines that economics doesn't look at, but there are remedies that have worked, and economics can do that too. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for providing such an interdisciplinary deep into this matter. That was interesting. Ipek, just in the interest of time, we can wrap up early, but.
Okay. Is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Marlene. Unfortunately, I don't have a PowerPoint to go with my comment because I received the paper somewhat late, but I'm very happy that Marlene was able to make it, despite some health problems. So I think let me start out by saying that I enjoyed the discussion of gender discrimination theories from the other disciplines that were in the paper. Some of the discussion of structural theories and homophily resonated with part of my experiences in my context. And also coming to her discussion of women in the economics profession, there were two components, the level of representation of women in the economics profession, but also the qualitative experiences of women in the economics profession. And some of the discussion that Marlene brought together from the literature, again, resonated with some of my experiences. And in fact, I want to share with you an experience I had with my dear friend and colleague Nilüfer Çağatay, to whom this workshop is dedicated. I had invited Nilüfer to Istanbul Technical University, to the Faculty of Management, for her to give a seminar on feminist economics. This was in the early 2010s. The dean of the faculty, who was an economist at the time, is there in the seminar. This is one of our weekly economics seminar. Nilüfer had a visual presentation. She got interrupted by the dean of faculty at her first or second slide, I think, she'd just gone beyond the cover slide, where the dean said, raised his hand, interrupted her, and said, I don't understand why gender and economics to start with, and what is feminist economics anyways? It was a shock. It was a rather small seminar room like this. And reading Marlene's paper, this experience from like 12 years ago, I think 10 to about 14 years ago, came back to me. And it was only as I was reading it last night, I realized what a traumatic experience it had been. Though we sort of brushed it under the carpet, I was ashamed towards Nilüfer that I ended up putting her in such a situation. I was extremely angry with the person who was creating this situation. And I was ashamed of myself as a younger woman economist at the time, somewhat, I think I had just gotten my tenure, that I couldn't do a better job of changing the dynamics in the room. I did eventually. I mean, between Nilüfer and I, we were able to sort of move the conversation, but we should have been, I was thinking if some of this literature had been out at the time, or at least within my knowledge, within my awareness, I would have been so much better at intervening I would have felt so much stronger. So I think some of this information and literature and discussion coming out about women in the economics profession has somewhat to do with the Me Too movement as well. And I'm very glad that some of these experiences that we have, which were not spoken, which were not part of research, which were not part of data collection, despite the fact that so many of us in this room are engaged in feminist economics and looking at gender disparities, etc. We're not making a point of looking at ourselves, what's happening in our houses. So therefore, my appreciation goes to being assigned to Marlene's paper and being becoming more familiarized with this literature. So some suggestions for improving the paper, and I know that you said it was a first draft. So first of all, I think all the figures that you have, you started out with saying 1/4 of women in the profession are women. It's in the US, right?
Yeah.
So everywhere you give a
No,
quotation.
actually, that was, let's see, Swift.
So,
No,
or at the SSA meetings or whatever. So in the Turkish context, 46% of the people in the profession are women, for instance. So there's more gender parity. Emma just helped to look it up. As it goes up to professors, it's about 1/3 are women, but overall it's almost parity. So there were a lot of figures, percentages, etc. I think it needs to be contextual. That if it is the US, it should be called the US. If it is the SSA, whatever it is. The second thing is that there were claims, and I think that was in one of your slides, beginning slides as well. You say economics or economic theories fails to explain gender disparities. You use gender disparities, differentials, gender inequities, gender discrimination, all interchangeably. So I think that also needs to be fleshed out. Like, are you talking about gender disparities in income, in employment, in professional experiences? And the more I read your paper, I started thinking you weren't talking about so much as employment disparities or earnings disparities, but rather the quality of professional experience, disparities with respect to quality of professional experience. And when you also say economics fails to explain, I felt, wait a second, I'm an economist and I spent my whole life engaging in economic theories, improving, developing conceptual analytical frameworks to explain gender and other intersectional inequalities. So I think you need to specify mainstream economic theories or orthodox economics fails to explain. And I would have welcomed maybe a section or an introduction of how feminist economics has helped to remedy this situation in
one of my papers.
Yeah, but you jumped from there, from how economics fails to explain disparities to talking about how we should therefore look at discrimination theories from other disciplines, right? Skipping feminist economics altogether. So I thought there was a sort of a discontinuity or something like big that was in that transition from mainstream economics to other disciplines. And I think while theories of the structural theories or homophily or stereotype bias, and what was the fourth one? Gendered racism. While those are quite strong theories as well. And feminist economics has its own approaches. One of the things that the paper could maybe dwell upon is the relative strengths and weaknesses of these different analytical approaches to explaining gender discrimination in the economics profession, and I think the more focused it is, the better it would be. You know, and if there's a way of bringing them together, you know, whether to what extent are they complementary versus, you know, proposing alternative accounts or for the same phenomena that we observe.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
You're a strict chair, but not following. So we actually started 10 minutes late, so we'll probably run into the coffee break. So I will have 12 minutes for question and answers. And we'll start the coffee break at, let's 3:40 instead of 3:30. So can I invite all the presenters here and then we can take those questions, please? So Mark has a question here.
Okay.
And then ML as well. And Marlene. Try to take maybe 5 questions.
So two quick questions. One I'll address to Oriel and Indira, and I'm picking up on this issue, which I think is fascinating, the equivalence or non-equivalence of the minutes, sort of primary activity, secondary. And I know it's sort of the next generation question perhaps, but do you think then there might ultimately be a role here for thinking in terms of some sort of equivalency scale, way in poverty thresholds, equivalency scales are used to take into account household economies of scale. So it's not directly germane to your papers, and I apologize for that, but I'm wondering if that might be the next step to sort of resolve that issue. And then for Marlene, you seem to my mind, have hit on an extremely important point, that is mainstream economics in some ways has to act against itself to solve the palpable problems that it's created. Because, you know, in the mainstream, differences are equitable and there is no real concept of power. So on one hand, it seems dismal, and perhaps as long as Larry Summers around, it will be. But also, I wonder, though, another way of looking at it is that in order to address the status of women in economics, which the AEA keeps somehow trying to do, there has to simultaneously be more openness to heterodox ideas. And at the same time, in order to advance heterodoxy in ideas and more plurality in thinking, then those who are interested mainly in that project might think of linking up with the status of women in the profession, because they turn out to be sort of two sides of the same coin. I'm kind of hoping there's strength in numbers, but I'd be interested to know what you think about it.
Thank you. Emil had a question there.
Thank you. I just want to discuss about this LFS and expenditure comment that Luiza made. It was great to think about, linking with expenditure surveys, and it will be wonderful, especially if we think about time and income poverty. Because otherwise, even we are using still survey of income living conditions, it's not a proper way of, it doesn't provide a proper way of measuring poverty. So that's one point. The other one is, I'm not very familiar about lifetime diary or forms, questionnaire forms. It was very informative. Just the question is, how do these organizations talk about how they train interviewers about the definitions of the activities? Say, like in Turkey, when we talk about leisure time, there was a strange example because it needs an expertise, how to aggregate all those activities. Under which activity title you are going to work? Like, is it a religious activity? What is it called in Turkish? The speech check, like prayer rosaries, beads, prayer beads. Is it a leisure activity or is it a religion? And where you should place it? So experts were thinking about that, like sitting discussing about it. So when you have lifetime diaries, you have the assumption that people already know what is unpaid work. Usually don't, they don't consider it as a work activity. So any of the activities that is included unpaid work. I think that's why at least we should insist on full-time diaries, and even if it is 10 years, even if it is so costly, I don't think we need to collect every year, as from even Tom's presentation, these behaviors, these redistribution, etc., all that time use patterns don't change every year, right? They don't need to implement it like Levy for surveys, like every year or quarterly.
Thank you. I'll take Valeria's because she raised her hand before, and then.
Thank you, Indira and Oriel. I think we've been having these debates for quite some time. And as Luiza said, there are always trade-offs involved. And my position has always been that as long as these trade-offs are transparent and the decisions of those designing the surveys justified, to me is good enough. As opposed to things that produce biased information like short or long tasks, as opposed to diaries, or simply because so-and-so donor has a preference for so-and-so type of instrument. And in those trade-offs, I would like to point that is not only the cost, but also the response rate. Something was not mentioned. So if the beautifully completed diary is much better than a beautiful completed a live diary, the fact that we get so high non-response rates in these full diaries might jeopardize the quality of the data we are collecting, and that is something we have to have in mind. The second is the module, and I think the discussion about the module has been around, but one advantage of having time-use data collected as a module of another survey is that we have the full information of that other survey, in particular income unemployment, which typically we don't have, or we don't have in good quality when we have a standalone time-use service. And therefore, the issue of policy issues that could be informed suddenly shrink enormously because we don't have the policy, the data we need to kind of understand policy. And Indira, in that sense, I really like the ILO approach, not only because I love the ILO, but because they take it seriously. But I have to say, Indira, you mentioned that you would be ready to give up all adults in a household and only have one adult or one respondent with a full diary. And to me, that is a trade-off I wouldn't agree with, because having everyone in the household is what allows us to do distributive analysis within households that we would not do otherwise, or we would have to have Tom doing the matchings that he does in order to get the composite household. So again, the trade-offs are there. I mean, again, so to take away transparency in those trade-offs, but also depending on the debate, we need to inform some of those trade-offs. Get one answer or another. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is it okay if we take your questions during the coffee break? Maybe I'm so sorry, but we don't have questions. Sorry for that. We'll start with Indira and then go in the same order as the presentation.
First of all, let me see your questions.
The microphone.
First, let me answer your questions. Just a second, just a second. Yeah, you say about 2 times visit. That's feasible or not. It is difficult, but you know, if you are investigating only one person from a household, from one day only, then you can follow up if you are an interviewer. That's, I mean, that may be easier than what you do right now. That's. Secondly, about mobile phone. Now, we must realize that there are a lot of changes taking place in these countries. For example, 85 to 90% of Indians use mobile phone. And surprisingly, they use mobile phone for many things. And even smartphones, what you call, is also, as the data show, 80% of Indians do. Even if they do not have a good house to live, they'll buy mobile. That's the kind of preference they have, right? So everybody knows it, and then others who know it can't afford it. And that's why I suggested that you give them for 1 or 2 days so that you can, because they would like to use it, and you can tell them, and they can help you in that. So I would like to explore this possibility, because this is a possibility which can work very well. And lastly, there was no other question, no, was there? No. Forget about it. About lifetime diary, you know, what happens in clubbing is there are 165 activities. You club them into 35 to 40 activities. You have to club a lot of activities together. In the case of India, for example, there were 3-4 places where clubbing came in the way of required details for the Indian economy. And that would happen anywhere, because so many activities clubbing into small number is always a problematic thing, you know. That's why it's really difficult to manage with only lifetime diary. If you use it as a supplementary for information like many other European countries do, it's okay. But otherwise, it's really very difficult.
Oriel, maybe 3 minutes?
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I don't mind if you want to skip the coffee break, but.
Yeah, on the evaluation question, because that's something raised by you, Indira, and so, yeah, I mean, I think we just have to, there has to be some way of doing this, because otherwise we're only left with primary activities and taking kind of activities, and I don't think that that's really good enough for some activities, in particular care, that might occur at the same time as other activities. What you could do, it's a general question. Presumably, childcare done as a secondary activity is worth some fraction of the primary care activity. And I mean, co-presence is almost something different, but I think you have the same issue with the ATUS child supervision module. You know, what do you do with that? Where do you put it? You've got the primary childcare, which presumably is what you use in your modelling, just the primary childcare. Right. But you know, what would you do with that other module, with the child supervision module? So it's the same issue really. I do think it needs to be addressed. And I mean, there's a wider issue that sort of arises from that is, you know, does time pressure, does time poverty, should that include some sort of measure of multitasking? Mm-hmm. can just imagine, you know, unfortunately, I'm not an economist, so, you know, but if you wanted to say that, you know, is that?
Things easier.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if I should just clarify this, but the light diary format, the online one, raises a couple of issues. I mean, it is a full diary, and perhaps we've misnamed it because it is a full diary. You can include, by using drop-down menus, you can include, I think we used the 120 activities of the Eurostat ETAs, and you can do the same with the cutters. We have done a crosswalk between them. And then with non-response, I mean, you can constrain in an online diary, you can prevent people finishing until they've completed a row, you know, and you can prompt them when they have missing time. And if they can't, and because of that, we have an extremely, you know, well completed diary for that 26 minutes, which can only be helped in an interview face-to-face situation. So, yeah, the non-response, which, yeah, was terrible. When you leave a diary behind and ask somebody to fill it in and, you know, you'll correct it in a week. Yeah, doesn't work. And, oh yes, just to say, I support Valeria, and I think you have to have more than one person in the household really to do it properly, to get those distributional issues. Yeah, the more the better. More than one day a week, more than one person per household, all through the year.
Yes, I agree with you. It is in the papers. One of the first things I said was open up the discipline, you know, to what journals are counted, the prospectus, feminist and heterodox. One of the papers, I quoted Heidi Hartman, which said that the AEA wants diverse membership, but they want a diversity of people, but they're not open to their ideas. And that's a problem. So absolutely, I agree. That's critical.
Thank you so much. It's 8:45. We try to be back at 4 p.m. Thank you all. And if there's anything, we can catch up with them during the coffee break.
Thank you.